Maybe after practicing meditation for some time or some kind of spiritual practice, you relieve your own suffering. Your mind becomes clear. But if that's true, if your mind is clear, then you reflect the world just as it is. Hello everyone, it's Jason, and I'm here answering your questions about Zen, meditation, your practice, life, any kind of question. Today's question is about spiritual bypassing. Now, this wasn't a question I received by email. This is a question I was asked when I was at the Sacramento Buddhist Meditation Group. I did post an audio podcast of my whole talk with the questions and answers in my Patreon community. So if you want to check out that podcast, I'll put a link down below so you can check it out. During the question and answer period, someone asked me about my take on their practice that they were taught by another tradition a long time ago. And what he was taught was that we should not make good and bad, right and wrong, like and dislike. That we should just focus on our own mind and saving ourselves. And then he said, but there's a lot of violence in this world, injustices, wars. These are bad things. So what he felt was like, you're not supposed to do anything, that you just look at this world as truth. The Buddha said that life is suffering. So I've heard this kind of question before, and I think it's important to talk about. If we look at the Buddha's life, when he was sitting under the Bodhi tree and realized enlightenment, he didn't stay under the tree. He didn't stay in this blissful state. He got up from the tree and then taught people for 49 years. So I think the Buddha is a good example of responding to this world's suffering. There's a bodhisattva of compassion named Kuan Yin. In fact, the school I teach in, the Kwanum School of Zen, is named after this bodhisattva of compassion. And this bodhisattva of compassion is known for hearing the cries of this world and responding with love and compassion. But sometimes people get caught up in what I call a Zen sickness or a Buddhist sickness. And that is we're clouded with some idea or some view about Buddhism or Zen or enlightenment or what it means to be a bodhisattva. And that view creates delusion. And if we stay in that delusion, then we only end up causing more suffering for this world. If you look up this term, spiritual bypassing, this is what it would say. Spiritual bypassing is the tendency to use spiritual practices to avoid dealing with unresolved emotions and psychological wounds. It can also be defined as attempts to rise above and deny unpleasant emotions, experiences, and realities in order to feel good and avoid discomfort and painful truths. If we look at human beings, many of us are avoiding unpleasant emotions or experiences, avoiding the suffering of this world. And usually people do that by distracting themselves with alcohol or drugs, maybe getting lost in social media. But I've also seen people do this with meditation or a spiritual practice. I've sat many long retreats where people were doing this. And I've also done this myself. So that's why it's important to practice. And I've been saying this many times in my videos lately, is every moment we make a vow to see through our delusions, even our spiritual idea delusions, our Zen idea, our helping this world idea. We take all of it away. And in my experience, when we truly do that and connect with this moment, then we just respond. We just do it. In my book, I talked about an experience where my family took a trip to the beach. And it was a beautiful sunny day, but there was riptide warnings. And riptides are very dangerous. These are waves that sweep in and then sweep people out. So at that time, my kids were 4 and 8 years old. So my wife and I talked about not getting too close to the water. And if they are going to go into the water, that they need an adult with them. I wasn't really worried about my 4-year-old daughter. She didn't want to get too close to the water and the waves. But my son was more of a risk taker, so I was really emphasizing with him to pay attention. Like if you see a wave coming in, then you run as fast as you can to the beach. So there was this part of the day where my daughter actually started to test the waters with her feet a little bit, and my son was kind of splashing around, and I was with him. And I was keeping my focus on my son, since he was usually the risk taker. So I was looking at my son, I saw a big wave coming in. And as I was watching him, he did what we talked about. He ran as fast as he could. So as the wave approached, I looked back, and the wave scooped up my daughter and pulled her back. And I remember at that moment, there was no thinking in my mind. I remember just seeing the wave grab her. And immediately I went behind, reached out my arms, and scooped her up. So I think this is a good example of our capability that we have. Even though we talked about safety and all of these things before, at that moment, it didn't help. The wave already grabbed her. So all I could do was act. I wasn't thinking good. I wasn't thinking bad. I didn't think it was right or wrong or like or dislike. All I did is perceived and responded. So after saying all of this, some people just do not have the capacity to respond to the world. Maybe they are going through something so difficult that they can't even take care of themselves. So looking back on my own experience, when I first started practicing, that's what I felt. I felt like I had to do retreats. I went to Korea to do a long 3-month retreat, but I didn't do the retreat to escape from the world. I wanted to do the retreat so I could have the capacity to face the world. But in order to do that, I had to face my own delusions and my own karma. Maybe after practicing meditation for some time or some kind of spiritual practice, you relieve your own suffering. Your mind becomes clear. But if that's true, if your mind is clear, then you reflect the world just as it is. So if you perceive suffering in this world, you just respond. Just like the Bodhisattva of compassion, Quinn, perceiving the cries of this world and responding with love and compassion. And like I mentioned before, maybe you don't have the capacity to connect with this moment and respond clearly because we're overwhelmed with our own suffering. So that's why it's very important to practice, especially with other people, maybe even doing retreats, and making our intention clear that my practice is not just to escape, to avoid the suffering of this world, to avoid my own suffering, because that will just create more problems for ourselves and others. So we make a clear intention that my practice is for all beings, which includes myself, because I am not separate from all beings. Those are my thoughts for the day. Let me know if this video was helpful. You can let me know by liking this video, putting a comment down below. Also, if you have any questions about Zen, meditation, your practice life, any kind of question, you can also put that in the comments below, and perhaps I'll make a video about it. Okay, everyone, I hope you're all doing well, and I will see you very soon.